Good afternoon and welcome to CSR Marketplace Virtual 2025. And this session particularly expanding impact, innovating relief funds across communities, sponsored by Emergency Assistance Foundation. My name is Jean Metzger. I'm the Vice President of Membership Marketing and Communications here at ACCP, and I'm so glad that you've joined us this afternoon. This session is one of 9 that we are doing this week as part of our CSR Marketplace virtual program. You'll see the full schedule on your screen. Registration will stay open throughout the week for these sessions, so feel free to register for them. They are all being recorded, and those recordings will be shared next week and be available through the end of the year. Before we get started with today's program, I do want to highlight a couple upcoming ACCP programs. We have our next members-only peer discussion on signature partnerships on July 10th. We'll be releasing our CSR Insight survey results on July 17th. Our monthly membership webinar will be also on July 17th. Our annual State of the Association meeting will be on August 19th. That'll be a great opportunity to hear about everything that's going on at ACCP and also hear from our new CEO, Andrea Wood. And we will be celebrating our 20th anniversary this year in Atlanta on September 15 through 17 at our annual conference. We hope that you all can join us. I will note that the early bird registration deadline is actually this coming Friday. So we hope you'll join us and we hope you will register by the end of the week in order to get the best rate. And then finally, our last virtual summit will be on employee engagement in November, on November 12 and 13. We also have been getting out into the community this year. We have a couple more local events coming up. We'll be in Minneapolis on July 30th. We'll be in Boston on September 25th. We'll be in New York on October 16th and in San Francisco in early December. Please keep an eye out for invitations to these local events, and we hope you will join us. Finally, for those of you that are interested in learning more about membership, whether you're already a member and just want to learn about all the different benefits that are available to you, or if you're thinking about membership, we invite you to visit our membership page. There's a QR code in the link on the screen. I also will drop my email address in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And now just a couple Zoom logistics. We have activated view the live transcript, which you can see how to get to by the directions on the screen. We also encourage you to interact with one another and with our speakers today by using the Zoom chat feature. And the speakers do want to hear from you and wants to answer your questions. So please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to ask your questions. You can ask the questions throughout. You can give a thumbs up to those that you want to upvote and want to hear also. And we'll be taking the questions towards the end. And with that, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Michelle Reichenbach, Chief Operating Officer at Emergency Assistance Foundation, and Meg Whitty, Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Marketing at LanzaJet.
Great. Thanks so much, Jean, and thank you, ACCP, for having us. And welcome to our session, Innovating Relief Funds Across Communities. So as Jean said, I'm Michelle Reichenbach, Chief Operating Officer at Emergency Assistance Foundation. Emergency Assistance Foundation, or EAF, is an efficient relief fund administrator, independently managing all fund activities, including accepting donations, objectively reviewing grant applications, and awarding and distributing grants, while also maintaining legal and regulatory compliance. We administer over 350 relief funds and have granted over $300 million in financial assistance all around the world. Just a little bit of background on me. I'm a mechanical engineer by training and worked for a few years as a contractor to the U.S. military. I spent almost 15 years in the hospitality industry, where I worked for Starwood Hotels and then Marriott International, and I led initiatives in philanthropy, social governance, disaster response, charitable partnerships, and employee engagement. In the Relief Fund segment, I served as the president of the Starwood Associate Relief Fund and later the Marriott Take Care Relief Fund. I have the pleasure today of speaking with Meg Whitty, VP of Corporate Affairs and Marketing at LanzaJet. Meg, I'll turn it over to you for a moment.
Thanks, Michelle. So happy to be here today. Really appreciate the time. Looking forward to chatting with you all about really how the EAF supported our company, LanzaJet, and I'll talk a little bit about what we do. But LanzaJet is a sustainable aviation fuels technology company and fuels producer based just outside of Chicago. But we're a global company working around the world to help reduce the carbon emissions associated with air travel. I have been working in the biofuel space for the better part of 17 years, starting at the Department of Agriculture in DC, and then United Airlines, where I worked on a Midwest Aviation Sustainable Biofuels Initiative, but also have worked across CSR, culture, communications, employee engagement, in various kind of functions as it relates to that work as well. But have been at LanzaJet now for nearly 3 years, and our company is 5 years old, so we're quite new, but we've learned a lot in that time and have our very first plant and the world's first sustainable aviation fuel plant from ethanol in Tupperton, Georgia. So more to come. Back over to you, Michelle.
Great, thank you. All right, so to start us off, I'm going to set the stage. What we're looking at here is a chart around the cost of disasters. And this is courtesy of NOAA. And what we're looking at here is across a year from January through December, the number of events that are happening within those months year over year. So the x-axis is January through December, looking at each month. The y-axis are the number of events. And this is looking at the number of billion-dollar disaster events over a 43-year period. So from 1980 to 2023 in the US. For the first 30 of those 43 years, the lines are showing up at the bottom of the graph. They're the light gray lines that you can barely see at the bottom. What this is really pointing out is in the 6 colorful lines near the top, those are the most expensive, CPI adjusted, most expensive years from a disaster perspective, starting in 2011. So in the last 43 years, the most expensive have been within the last 12. What this tells us, and I think what everybody already knows, is that disasters are getting more frequent, more severe, and it is not a matter of if, but when. Out of almost 22,000 natural disaster grants that EAF awarded from the past 2 years, the top 4 categories of expenses awarded immediately following a natural disaster are food, housing, and housing includes home repairs, replacement of appliances and furnishings, assistance with rent and mortgage, adaptive improvements to your home, or temporary housing, evacuation expenses, and clothing. There exists a potential lack of access to resources immediately following a disaster. And it can be challenges with the initial support network. It takes time to establish declarations, both state and federal, to get funding and personnel and supplies on the ground. Providing immediate cash grants provides breathing room and dignity to focus on individual needs. Disaster relief funds are designed to address these needs. Traditionally, we see employer-sponsored relief funds, which means that an employer or a company is the primary donor and sponsor of the fund. Oftentimes, there will also be donations coming in from employees and/or customers to the fund. The most successful see a combination of both. These can be managed by an in-house company, corporate 501c3 entity, or through an independent fund administrator like EAF. The mission of these funds is to provide financial assistance to impacted individuals following an unexpected disaster or personal hardship. Every fund has a defined charitable class, which is the group of individuals who are eligible to apply for a grant from the relief fund. For an employer-sponsored fund, the most common charitable class members are employees of XYZ company. In some cases, the charitable class expands to include retirees, family members, seasonal workers, contractors, or vendors. The reason why we differentiate between being an employee of the company and being a member of the charitable class is that when someone applies to a fund, they're not applying as an employee, they're applying as an independent individual to a 501c3 charitable organization that has received tax-exempt donations and is issuing tax-free grants. Many companies have a general philanthropic disaster response plan, including making corporate donations and/or supporting employee and customer donations to established on-the-ground response and recovery organizations. Where we are seeing changes is in companies that may already sponsor an employee relief fund, looking beyond that to the impacts of these disasters on the communities and other stakeholder groups that are important to the business. The relief fund model allows for a defined charitable class of people to receive direct cash grants to individuals and families that they can use for immediate needs. To facilitate this, EAF launched our People First Fund model in 2023 to expand our reach and further our commitment to helping as many people in need as possible. People First funds are disaster specific, and the charitable class is typically defined as individuals with their primary residence in a defined location that were impacted by a specific event. For example, after the wildfires in January of this year, we launched a People First Fund for Southern California, and the charitable class was defined as individuals with primary residence in the greater Los Angeles area during the Southern California wildfires in early 2025. There are two primary ways that companies are supporting this expanded outreach to stakeholder groups beyond their own employees. First is to incorporate short-term immediate needs funding into your overall disaster giving strategy, so that donations are going directly to impacted individuals and to organizations on the ground supporting response and recovery at the community level. Many companies have pre-established nonprofit partners, and what we are seeing is that giving to relief funds is in addition to these existing partnerships. The second way to sponsor a fund for a specific impacted stakeholder group that matters to your business is to work with a fund administrator. The second way to sponsor a fund for a specific impacted stakeholder group is working with a fund administrator to define the charitable class and communicate the availability of grants. I'm joined today by an esteemed partner who is leading the way in this evolution of disaster relief. I'm inspired by their use of limited resources to further expand the reach of their disaster response efforts. I'll turn things over to Meg to share more about LanzaJet and their response to Hurricane Helene and the destruction it caused in Treutlen County, Georgia.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it. So, the main reason I'm here today is to be able to share with you how helpful EAF was to my company during a very difficult time for our team. But before I get into specifically how EAF supported us, I wanted to give you all a context for who we are and what we do and why it was so meaningful and impactful. So LanzaJet is a sustainable aviation fuels technology company and fuels producer. But what does that mean? So sustainable aviation fuels are the industry's single greatest wave to decarbonize. So to give you context, 3% of overall transportation emissions comes from aviation. Aviation is a critical means for connection and commerce, and the industry itself is only going to continue to grow. We're only going to keep flying, and it's going to be a critical way for us to connect cultures and communities around the world. But SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, is the most effective way that aviation has to reduce its carbon emissions. There are other ways it can do it through operational efficiencies, advanced technologies, offsets, and market-based measures, things like that. But sustainable aviation fuel is actually going to account for 65 to 70% of overall emissions reductions for aviation. Next slide. So what is SAF? Essentially, SAF helps reduce carbon emissions as a drop-in fuel, reduces carbon emissions relative to traditional fossil jet fuel by up to 70% or even carbon negative, depending on the source. Our technology uses ethanol, so it converts ethanol into low-carbon jet fuel. So really impactful in terms of how this happens. And it's already commercial today. In fact, over 450,000 flights have already been flown on sustainable aviation fuel. No aviation infrastructure needs to change. It's a drop-in fuel. It's molecularly identical to fossil jet fuel. And so it's already happening today, which is very exciting. Airlines want to buy more sustainable aviation fuel, but the production just isn't there yet. You see all these airlines here, and 50 total airlines have actually already purchased sustainable aviation fuel. So who's LanzaJet? LanzaJet was founded in 2020 by these folks here that you see. A number of folks came together across the industry and said, we have an urgency here to reduce the carbon emissions of aviation. So we had the fortune of having a number of different world-class sort of blue chip organizations come together and say, we want to invest in an organization that has a technology that can scale. And so our technology uses ethanol, again, to convert to sustainable aviation fuel. Go ahead to the next slide. We've already flown 2 commercial flights on it across the Atlantic and across the Pacific in 2018 and 2019. Very exciting for us. We are building projects around the world. So you can see here a number of the projects that we've already publicly announced. But our very first project is in the United States in rural Georgia, in Treutlen County, as Michelle referenced. The world's first ethanol to sustainable aviation fuels plant will produce 10 million gallons a year. And I know that sounds small given the overall industry is 100 billion gallons a year of fossil jet fuel is used. But again, super important to get this industry off the ground. So we have the first plant using ethanol to grow. We've built the plant. We've created over 300 direct jobs in the community of around 3,000 people during construction, 30 to 50 ongoing, 30 to 50 full-time jobs and indirect there in Treutlen County, and has really contributed really meaningfully to the community between $5 million in new wages and $70 million in overall economic activity for the community. So a little quick video here for you all to understand sort of the how and the why for what we do and how we're building out our plant there in Soperton.
Ordinary people in extraordinary places have a will to change the world. It happens down newly made roads, in 100,000-gallon tanks, through miles of metal pipes, fueling our means of connection from above. Change takes decades of operating experience, hundreds of years working in fuel and related industries to create new jobs, to propel countries to collaborate, to produce 1 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. Change takes thinking bigger. Technology, policy, airlines, investors, and flyers. Everyone, everything, working in lockstep so that we can continue to travel, explore, innovate, connect, make industry move, enable an energy transition, and ensure a shared, sustainable, net zero future for us all. Not in 5 years, not tomorrow, today. It starts at LanzaJet Freedom Pines Fuels.
So that is our plant in rural Georgia. And right as we were starting up and getting ready to turn on last September, we had Hurricane Helene hit. And as many of you may remember, it was pretty devastating for much of Georgia and the greater Southeast United States. To give you a sense a little bit about Soperton, Georgia, it's a community of around 3,000 people. Median household income is around $27,000, sort of significantly lower than the Georgia state median of income of $51,000. And approximately a third of the population lives below the poverty line. So already a pretty at-risk community. Hurricane Helene hit when it made landfall, Category 4. Huge destruction in the region, Category 2 when it actually hit Soperton. So very significant for the region. Huge amount of damage in the city, or huge amount of damage in the state. Georgia alone had 37 fatalities and over $7 billion in damages. So that first picture I showed you of the Capitol there in Soperton, this was a picture after Hurricane Helene. And there are a few more pictures in here, Michelle, if you want to roll through. Yeah. And just a huge amount of devastation. That video that you saw filmed was right this downtown area. So really unfortunate to see the damage in the community. But effectively, and we don't need to watch this video, but just to share, there was a lot of structural damage, a lot of folks they had no power for nearly 2 weeks, no running water. The wastewater systems were getting backed up. Significant damage in the community. And so our team on the ground wanted to help. Our plant had no power. There was no work that we could do. We wanted to swing into gear. Go to the next slide. But we weren't specifically sure exactly how to help. Oh, you can skip through the video. We weren't exactly sure how to help. we were also getting lots of emails and calls from the investors that I showed you earlier from around the world saying, hey, we've seen what's happening in Georgia. We've seen what's happening in Soperton. What can we do? The team on the ground was incredible in terms of figuring out, okay, here's what we have. Here's what we can do today. We know we have connections with getting folks some water. We have fuel. So the team was driving around and doing that. But we knew we wanted to make a bigger impact in the community, and we really weren't sure what to do. Go ahead and just keep rolling through that, Michelle. Again, we had really great feedback. We were helping with fuel. The team was just scrambling all over the place, but there wasn't great coordination. The quotes that we received from the mayor was, can go through the next slide there, Michelle, a couple more. Just lots of huge opportunities, but they didn't know what to do next. They had never seen anything like this. The team felt like they were paralyzed. I was from my home in Des Moines, Iowa, was ordering pizzas for the emergency response team down there, but it felt like, man, there's got to be a better way. So we did a bunch of research and trying to figure out how can we help? What do we do? And that's when we learned about the Emergency Assistance Foundation and what they offered. We wanted to not only be able to help our own employees who needed help quickly, but also wanted to do more for the greater community. And we wanted to be able to do that quickly and not have to be worried about red tape and sort of timelines. And we weren't sure where to start. So fortunately, Michelle and her team were extremely helpful. We were able to reach out, hop on calls that day, and help get set up very quickly to, okay, what's needed? How do we pull together flyers for the community? Okay, what do we have? What resources are available? How do we communicate? We hopped on calls with the mayor, the county commissioner, and Michelle and her team made lots of phone calls to them to figure out, okay, what's the best way to verify residency, because that was a big thing. We wanted to make sure, okay, if you're a resident, and Michelle was talking about verified classes that can be eligible. So how do we verify that? And sitting through that. So putting all that information together, putting up Facebook posts, we were able to get it in the local newspaper to let people know, here's how you can get assistance and get help. We wanted to give to the employees. We wanted to give to the community members. We wanted to align from funders across the world who wanted to be able to add their dollars, and just do it quickly and efficiently and make it easy for folks. So these were all really important things for us, both from an employee standpoint and for the broader community. One of the things that we take pride in at LanzaJet is that we're a young company, right? We're 150 people. We don't have a ton of resources. We have local team there, but we don't have a lot, and we're early stage. And so how can we pool together funds and let people know what's available and how we can be helpful both on the ground and then from around the world? So they helped us get our website up and running in days, not weeks, which, as many of you know, is very hard to do. Helped us advise us on, say, okay, how do we do this? Where do we put the bounds? Do we do the county? Do we do the city? What are the ranges? And they were really, really helpful to me and to my team when we were like, okay, so what is the average amount that somebody might be requesting, and what should we put bounds on? It was really extremely helpful for us at the time, to having never done anything like this before, to have the advice of Michelle and her team to better understand, hey, typically this is what we see with this type of event and these requests. And so that was extremely helpful to move quickly. And they were also great when we hopped on regular phone calls each week to go, okay, here's where things stand. Here's where we might be able to adjust. Here's how we could communicate more. Just really, really solid, helpful, meaningful partners, which when you're going through something like this, it means a lot. We have been able to provide 25 individuals in the community over $50,000, which has been really helpful. We had grants from $500 to $3,000 to those eligible residents, and we've continued to award folks as they've continued to apply, which has been super helpful. And again, this was one of the articles we got placed in the local paper to raise awareness, but we also use social media. LanzaJet has received a bunch of awards over the last year, which has been great for us as an organization. But the best award that we received, hands down, and Michelle, you can go to the next slide, is the Million Pines City Citizen Impact Award, which I have no doubt we would not have been able to get and without the help of EAF and the work that they did to make sure we were able to support the community there in Soperton. This was a quote from from the community there, but they've said, hey, before this, you guys were a partner and now you're like family. That means the most to us in terms of how we're growing this company around the world and the communities that we want to be a part of. So it takes a lot. And as you know, working in the corporate social responsibility space, it is difficult. It is hard. It's really important and meaningful work. And we believe that you have to have both the dreamers to get the work done, but also the warriors to make sure it happens. And so from the entire team at Freedom Pines, but also across LanzaJet, we've been so grateful to have the support of an organization like EAF to be able to give back. And if and when we build more plants across the United States, we hope to be able to do this and have this support ready for others across our communities. I think that's it from my end. Try to roll through that pretty quickly.
Well, thank you, Meg. And there's a slight delay in the slide, so I'm making sure, there we go.
Yeah, and as we say at LanzaJet, you don't have to wait for someday to get started and do good work. Someday is now. So that's our fun tagline. But yeah, that's it from my end. So thank you so much for ACCP for having us, and EAF for all the good work that they did to support us during what was a very difficult time.
And I see that Jean has put in the chat, if you have any questions for us, put them in the Q&A. I'm going to start off by asking Meg a couple questions just to help share a little bit more of the detail of how this came about. So Meg, first of all, thank you so much for your partnership. And can you tell us a little bit more about what it was like for you in your role from a corporate perspective, working with your team members in the local plant and working and connecting with the local community after the disaster to coordinate your various teams?
Yeah, it was really difficult because not only were we dealing with not really having somebody who was necessarily in charge, but there weren't phones. They didn't have access to phones, the internet, and so communicating itself was really difficult. And so, when you have moments like this and there is sheer chaos, nobody really knows where to begin. But there was this ask from our investors from around the world of, we want to be able to help tell us what to do. And so just trying to figure out the best way from Des Moines, Iowa, to be able to help folks in Soperton, Georgia, how we could figure out the best way to get them funds and resources as fast as we could it was very chaotic, but it was, I think what was helpful for me is once we had a means through which we could channel funds, it made it a lot easier to at least have some organization for the team to be able to reach out and ask questions and feel like they were doing something.
Perfect, thank you. And I know you mentioned this during your talk, but let's talk a little bit about the charitable class verification process.
Yeah.
Obviously, with an employer-sponsored fund, charitable class verification is typically done by the employer, and you have records of who works for the company and whether they meet the criteria. How did you go about it with Soperton?
Yeah, so we had the team down there working with our head of people here, who's based in Chicago, and making sure that we had the details for the employees and letting them know kind of, hey, this is available for you to apply for, sharing that with them regularly, being able to hop on calls, answer questions, confirm whether or not they had a valid opportunity for funding. And then also, I think your question was specifically about employees, but also with the community, figuring out, I think that was actually the more challenging piece of it for us, Michelle, was how do we figure out exactly who are the people who are eligible within Soperton and Treutlen County? And that was tricky because we were like, okay, so do we use water bills? Do we use residency? And we ended up using, as you know, I know you know, but we used voter registration. And that was super helpful in working closely with, the local, the mayor and the county commissioner to figure out, okay, here are the voter registration and are these accurate? And then we would verify and work closely with them. But that was so helpful to have your team support and figure out where to even begin because we had no idea what to do. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, and to add to that, so we did end up using the voter registration list, and that allowed EAF to do the verifications as they came in. And that helped us address about 95% of the applications, and having connection with the local mayor, he was our resource for anybody that we could not identify to help validate. And so that reduced the ask of him, and we only had to go to him a couple of times for assistance. So that ended up working out really well. One more question for you, and then we'll see if there's any other questions in the audience. Why did you choose to go the route of setting up two funds, one for employees and one for the community?
Yeah, and this goes back to kind of our company. We very much wanted to make sure we knew acutely what some of the employee issues were and what we could do there, but we also knew from a whole community perspective that we wanted to be able to support and be a partner. This community doesn't have a lot of resources. It's a small 3,000 person community, not a lot of kind of big companies that are based there. And we knew that we had the support of companies around the world who would be able to come in and provide some extra dollars. And so we wanted to be able to maximize that opportunity, and share more resources with the community there. So we knew we wanted to be able to do both if we could. And fortunately, working with EAF helped us get that set up in a matter of days, which was fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you, Meg.
Yeah.
Jean, do you have any? Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question if I could ask one. So now sort of you went through this. What do you wish you knew or planned for before this happened? So everyone in the audience, as they think about, you can never quite anticipate when a disaster is going to happen. So how do people best prepare for it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll speak from my perspective, right? So with our company, having a sense of, hey, there are organizations like EAF out there that can be very helpful very quickly. One, obviously, I think two, given the fact that we are in the business of helping to reduce the impacts of climate change, and when you think about climate resilience, and when you think about the impacts of, these climate, issues, you think about how we are future-proofing operations, how we're helping to build more resilient communities. And it all sort of comes full circle, right? So if we hope to reduce the impacts of carbon emissions, the impacts to nature, hopefully will continue to improve. But specifically as an organization, very tangibly, have a good sense of what resources are available and can be deployed quickly across the country, across your community, and globally too, right? And we are a global company, and being able to do this from afar. I was literally calling, I said this earlier, but I was from my house in Des Moines, Iowa, was calling and ordering pizzas from the Pizza Hut in a town over to get to the emergency team so that they could just have food. And there's like, this is wild, but there was no internet, there was no phones. And so just we did things like, we had to buy satellite phones after this happened because we had no way of communicating with our teams. We have a pretty strong crisis communications plan that we had put together, and it's very hard to communicate at all when there's no internet and there's no phone. And I think we all realize pretty acutely when we lose track of our phones or the internet goes down, how we've sort of resorted back to very elemental basics of knowledge and access to very, very basic things. So anyway, lots of communities can do, lots of companies can do, but being aware of organizations like EAF that can support you and can support you quickly was extremely helpful for us.
That's great. Thank you. Michelle, can you also answer that question? Recognizing you work with a lot of different companies, what are some of the things you see in your client base in terms of preparation for disasters?
Yeah, I can definitely add to that. I think Meg hit all the highlights, and a few that I'll just reiterate. One is having that disaster response plan in place, or that crisis response plan. And I know a lot of companies do have something, but being able to do kind of a mock run on an annual basis. So even when disaster isn't happening, doing a trial run, just make sure you've got all those little pieces and throw those tough scenarios out there so that you have thought through the pieces. And also editing it annually, right? So reviewing it and see as you go through each disaster, what do you need to modify and update? The other piece is, thinking about things like a relief fund or your disaster giving strategy and those partnerships. It's always easier to do that before the disaster happens. So being as proactive as possible and thinking about what your need is and what you can get set up in advance so that it's ready to go as soon as you need it.
It's great. Well, I would like to thank you both for sharing your wisdom. I would like to thank all the participants who logged in today. There is a very short session survey we'd like you all to take. You can use the QR code on the screen, or the link is in the chat. And as I mentioned, we do have several more CSR Marketplace sessions happening tomorrow and on Thursday. And we hope to see you there. And if not, at a future ACCP event that's coming up soon. So thanks again, everyone. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Bye all.